Hello and welcome back to another video on mastering the SQL SELECT statement. I'm Michael Fudge and I'm happy that you're here. In this episode, we'll learn about the pivot and unpivot clauses. You can use these clauses to transform your queries from rows into columns or vice versa. I hope to demonstrate not only how to use these, but why you would want to use them in the first place. Okay, let's get started. As the name implies, the pivot operator transforms rows into columns. The data in the row column intersection is summarized. So basically, if you have a column like this and you have column and value are the names of these columns, then you run a pivot over them, and you're always pivoting over the values. So we're going to sum this column, and then we're going to use the change in values over this column, and I have to explicitly include those values. So I want to see A's and B's. And then what you get back is a column A with a sum of those values and a column B with a sum of those values. So that's pivot. It's going to create a summary of values over a column, and then you have to include the values from that column. And you can use any aggregate: sum, count, min, max, etc. So unpivot sort of does the reverse. Okay, what unpivot does is it transfers columns into rows. So if you had a table like this with column A and B and these numbers in them, and you said unpivot value for column in AB, what this would end up doing is for every value in column A, give me a row. So I have A3, A6, A3, A6. And then for every value in column B, I have a row, B2, B10. So it's a way to take columns and then transform them into rows. There is no aggregate operation going on with unpivot. It's merely taking the value in the cell and adding it to the row with the name of the value in the column. That's basically it. So let's get on and demonstrate how to use these two things in queries. Once again, I'm out here in Azure Data Studio, and I'm looking at the surveys table that we used in the previous lesson. And what you might want to do, for example, in this surveys table is maybe you want to get a count of people with a different degree, right? So 4-year degree, graduate degree, 2-year degree, right? You could easily do something like that. You can, I'm trying to give you the motivation behind using pivot. So you might say, well, I'll just say, give me a count, as survey count. And then you might group by the education, right? We've seen this before. Okay, that's pretty neat. Now, you might want to get the same information, but you also might want to get a count by whether or not they were married. So that was marital status, right? So you'd say, oh, I could do that. I can add that up here, marital status. And then down here, I could group by marital status. But this information can sort of be hard to read and understand because there's two combinations of variables and then a count here, and I can't get a very efficient summary. Like, for example, here's a 2-year degree, prefer not to answer, and then here's a 2-year degree single, but it's hard to get like a summary of this same information. So what you can do and achieve with pivot is you could take one of these dimensions, like education, and show that in the row, and then you can take the other column and marital status and show that in the column, and then at the intersection between these two you can then apply an aggregate operator like count. So basically, to set this up, you need a common table expression. So I guess I'll label this, and then let's say let's put marital status in column. So the way you have to do pivot is you have to first set up exactly what you want to pivot in a common table expression. So and I usually call it pivot source. It's just easier. Hardest thing to do is name stuff. And in this case, what we want to pivot is the education, and the marital status. I need to put a batch operator in here from surveys. And let me just run this. That's what I want to pivot. What am I going to count? It doesn't really matter. I can count education, I can count marital status, I can count email ID, whatever. And now I write the pivot. So the pivot is going to be select from pivot source. And then I have my pivot operator, which is part of the from. And then you have to alias the pivot, so I always call it as pivot table. This is just what I do. You can call it anything you want. And now in here is where you apply your pivot. And basically the pivot is what you saw on that PowerPoint slide. We need to do something like count. I don't know, let's count marital status. Doesn't matter which one we really count. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to say for marital status. I know I spelled that wrong. And then in the in column are the values that we want to project into a column. So married, single. Okay. Now, I like to delineate these with double quotes. Double quotes are reserved for column names in SQL, but this helps me to realize that, these are not true columns, they're values, so they look value-ish, but they still use the syntax of the double quote, which is reserved for column names. And it sort of helps to get my head around what's happening. So let's run this. And so now what you get is you get all the different educations, and then you get the count of people who are married or single in there. And it's now a cross tabulation or a pivot of those values. So that's basically what you get out of pivot. If you look carefully here, we have 2-year degree. Let's go to one that looks a little outlier. We have high school, and then there's 1 married and 2 single. Let's go back and look at this original one and see if we can find the same thing. High school, 1 married. Two single. So see, the same information is there. We're just choosing to display it in a different way. There's also this prefer not to answer. And if I want, I can add that up here as well. So that shows up in addition to the others. There you go. So 3 people did not answer whether or not they were married. Now, here's an interesting thing. Like, let's suppose you type in a column that doesn't exist. What happens? Do you get an error? No, you just get a column that doesn't have any values in it because nothing matches that. Remember, on the pivot operator, it's looking for a match of this value. It's looking for a match of this value from this column. If it doesn't exist, it just counts that as a 0. You can do counts, sums, averages, mins, max, whatever. Let's do a more sophisticated example. This time, let me just take a look at what we got here. All right, this time, let's do something like, let's get an average of this household income. Only if they answered. And let's do that by home ownership. And I don't know, maybe education. All right. And let's only grab we're only going to grab some of the degrees. We're not going to grab all of them because there's a lot of educations. Okay. So we want to get a summary average household income by home ownership. Let's not do education. Let's do marital status and marital status. So let's, step one is you set up the pivot, right? So it's with pivot source as, and you need to get the columns you need. So in this case, I'm going to need, let's see here, I'm going to need household income, but I need to remove the prefer not to answer, right? Because this is a text column here, and I need it to be a number if I'm going to average it. But I definitely need own home and marital status. So own home, marital status from surveys. Own home, marital status. And then let's cast that household income as a decimal. And then let's call that as income from surveys, where now we want to make sure that household income is not equal to prefer not to, I'm not going to type that in correctly. Let's just copy that. Prefer not to answer. And while we're at it, we probably want, I don't know. Let's say if you didn't answer, some people said prefer not to answer for own home. Let's remove those. And own home does not equal prefer not to answer. Okay. So now I always like to run this first to see what I'm looking at. Okay. So I have, did you own a home? No. You married? $65,000 income. Do you own a home? Yes. You single? There's your income. Okay. So now I want to put this in the row, own home, and I want to put this in the column, and I want to average that. Okay. So now I can work on my pivot. That's always the same. Now comes the fun part. So what are we going to do? We're going to average the income for, what do we want in the column? Marital status. And then I have to give it a list of things I want it in. So now these are how do I want them to show up? Like, do I want single first, married first? What do I want? So I'm going to go with single first. Then I'm going to have the next column be married. Then I'll have the last column be prefer not to answer. All right, that looks good. And let's run it all. Okay, there you go. So you have home ownership, no. Single, married, average for single, average for married, average for prefer not to answer. Home ownership, yes. Average for single, average for married, average for prefer not to answer. Okay, and that's basically another pivot that you can build. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about unpivot. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually unpivot this that you see. Now, I do not want to use this in a from clause, so I'm going to make a view out of it. So I'm going to come down here, and let's do a drop view if exists, and let's just call it v home average by marital status. And then let's do create view as that. And then what's the name of the view? It's going to be this. So create view home average by marital status as all that stuff I just did before. Now I'm going to run this code here. And now in the catalog, there it is, home average by marital status. And I can treat it as a table, right? I have to put a go in here. And there it is. There's my source. Now, let's suppose this is just some table somewhere, and you want to unpivot it. What does unpivoting do? Unpivoting takes these columns and transforms them into rows. So unpivoting is a lot simpler than pivoting because you usually do not have to table alias with a common table expression. You can sort of get away with just doing something like this. You could say unpivot. And what do I want to unpivot? I want to unpivot, and then I need to alias this as unpivot table. And then what I want to do here is I want to get the, usually the way that this works is with the unpivot, you say column for value in, and then these are the values. So what I want to do is this column is going to be the intersection here, like that, right? And that's going to be the average income. That's what this thing is. That's an average income. That's an average income, right? And then and then what are these things up here? That's marital status. And then these are the values that I want to unpivot. So maybe I just want to unpivot single and married. And I don't want to unpivot prefer not to answer. Yeah, I'll do it in a bit. And that's basically the unpivot. So this unpivots columns into rows. And there you go. And you see it's still kept, well, I don't think I did that. No, I did that right, single, married, but it still kept the prefer not to answer because I didn't unpivot that, and I selected star, right? So if I choose not to show that, if I say select own home, right, and then average income, and then marital status, and I leave out prefer not to answer, then I get this. Okay. And then I can add prefer not to answer as a row by adding it here. Remember, this projection happens after the from clause, and in the from clause, we're unpivoting. Don't forget your order of execution. That still matters. Okay, so now I get, each of my different own homes, no, 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 yes, 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 single, married, prefer not to answer, and the average. Okay, so that's unpivot. Now let me give you a more realistic reason for using unpivot, a very common reason that I use it all the time. And I use unpivot to handle data that is not queryable because someone made a poor design decision with the data. And a good way to show you this is I have a table here in demo called contacts. And this table is classic kind of thing we see in a database where we got a column for the home phone and a column for the mobile phone and a column for the work phone, etc. And where this is problematic is if you just want to query people that have a phone number in like area code 315, it's impossible to do that. For example, I might say where the home phone is like 315-%, just to find the home phones that are 315, right? Okay, I got that, but it also shows this mobile phone that's 415, and I don't want to show that, but that's in a column. I can't not do that, right? And so you might say, well, I did drop off another person that had a 315, so you say, well, I'm going to add an or here, and or the mobile phone is like 315, right? 315. And now I get, Crystal Ball's mobile phone, but I still end up showing Sherry Wine's mobile phone of 415. So it's not easy to do exactly what we want, which is just get the phone numbers that begin with 315. Maybe I want to make a list that I want to give someone, and I say, call all these numbers. So it's just not feasible with the way the data are structured. So the way we can fix this is with using unpivot. Basically, we're going to unpivot these columns into rows, like so. So we'll say select everything. Let's just do select star to make it simple to start. From contacts. And we want to unpivot. And then as unpivot table. And then what are we going to do here? Remember, what is this? That's a phone number. Right? For each of these columns, what are these called? Phone type. Right? That's a phone number. This is a phone type, mobile phone. Right? These are columns that are going to be generated. And then you put in the set of values. So I want to use home phone, mobile phone, work phone, and other phone. Now I get a table where there's a column and it has all the phone numbers in there. And if I treat this as a common table expression, now I can query it. If I say, with source as this, now I can say select everything from source where phone number is like 315. And this will get me all the phone numbers in that area code that I wanted. There you go. And none of the other ones. And in addition, I know who they are and what type it is. Oh, that's their mobile phone, that's their work phone, that's their home phone, that's their work phone. Okay, so that's a really good use case for unpivot. In general, when you have a table structure where there are columns of the same data, like these are all phone numbers, you can then use unpivot to combine all of those independent columns into a single dependent row. And in addition, you get a column that contains the type of that was in each original column, so that you have a source of where these numbers came from. So that's basically pivot and unpivot, ways to transform the data in your table.